If you tried to pole vault over the Empire State Building, you would fly up about 20 feet before smashing into it. Now, if you dug a giant slot in front and ran faster than a race car while hugging a pole that's almost 2,000 feet long and 4 feet thick, you could plant it into the slot, and the pole would snap back, sending you flying at hundreds of feet per second as you clear the top. To survive, you would need a foam mat the size of a large building, but even then, the force would be so great, you would probably faint before you even hit it. The strip would cover every little bump on your tongue. Then it pairs with an app and you pick a flavor. Now you can eat steamed broccoli, and the cover will block the taste signals, replacing them with your selected flavors, meaning your broccoli will taste like a bacon cheeseburger. A glass of water tastes like an ice-cold soda, and a sad bowl of boiled chicken tastes like movie theater nachos. But if you bite your tongue, the cover could glitch, and suddenly every flavor loads at once. They dug a trench around their house because the flood was approaching. They packed tight layers of dirt on top into a ridge and covered the whole thing with plastic tarps. And when the flood hit, the water rushed against the outside, getting blocked by the ridge. And for 7 days, the rain kept coming, so they kept packing even more dirt on top. Eventually, nearly 60 other homes were destroyed, and the entire town was almost completely covered by water, while their house was perfectly dry. If you have a boring assignment to finish, but you really want to play video games, instead of using willpower, just pretend that you're Batman. Then ask yourself, what would Batman do right now? And suddenly, the assignment feels less like a personal struggle and more like a mission. That small mental shift can help you zoom out, ignore distractions, and do the thing you were avoiding. They put a stick into the coiled rope, trying to pin down the loop, so when you pull it, the rope gets trapped. But instead, the rope actually slips free every time. And that's because the coil isn't one simple loop. It's actually made up of 3 visible rope sections, stacked close together on the table. If you want the audience member to win, pull the first 2. This will trap the rope around the chopstick. But if you want them to lose, pull the second and third sections instead, changing the shape of the loop and letting it slip right past the stick. If you watched every Zach D film short, it would take you about 28 hours to get to the last one. But what if you wanted to watch every video on YouTube? At first, it sounds possible until you realize there are over 20 billion. And while you're watching, YouTube gets about 720,000 hours of new video every day. Even if you never slept and watched at 3 times speed, you'd only see 72 of those hours daily, meaning you would need a team of 10,000 people watching non-stop just to keep up with new uploads. The kangaroo is smaller than your thumb. It's blind, it's hairless, and its back legs barely work. But the second it lands on its mother's fur, it has to start climbing. The mother doesn't help it in the pouch. The joey has to crawl there completely on its own. This would be like a human baby climbing an entire building floor. Now, if it makes it, it latches on to a nipple, which swells inside its mouth, locking the joey in place for months. And even after it finally lets go, it'll sometimes hop out to explore, but whenever it needs milk or safety, it climbs right back in. The pen would create perfectly spaced dots because when it was dragged, the gear would turn a hidden wheel inside. As the wheel spun, tiny bumps on the edge pushed a lever up and down, lifting the pen tip on and off the paper to create the satisfying dots. By swapping the wheel for others, the pen could create different sized dashes, letting architects use a variety of lines for their designs. But then computers showed up, and everyone forgot about this interesting little pen. She would sit at her window and track when her neighbors left for work, when they ate their meals, and when they went to bed. Now, she just liked to keep tabs on the neighborhood, which is how she noticed the new neighbor moving in across the street. She quickly got a fresh new sheet and began taking notes. Now, everything was normal for a while, until one night she heard something weird. She rushed to the window and saw the man driving away with something in his trunk. Hours later, he returned, covered in dirt. He showered and went to bed. Now, on its own, this could have meant nothing, but she was convinced that he was up to no good. The next night, she was ready. At the same time, he plopped a big bag into the trunk, drove into the night, came back dirty, and took a shower. Weeks passed, her walls filling with guesses on where he was going and what he was doing. At this point, she was convinced of two things. There were bodies in those bags, and no one was going to believe her. She finally called the police because she was just too convinced that he was a killer. The officer came and calmly explained that her neighbor wasn't doing anything illegal. And this is where she should have let it go. But she couldn't. She saw him doing even more strange things. So she called the officer again and again. Finally, he suggested that they go over and introduce themselves to put her mind at ease. He was going to prove to her that this was all just a big misunderstanding. At least that's what she thought. He brought her over and knocked on the door. Inside, she saw strange tools. Jars filled with things she couldn't identify. Gruesome shapes hanging from the ceiling. It was him. Her notes had been right all along. He was a killer. But when she turned to the officer, well, it turns out he was in on it all along. If you have an early flight in the morning and you know you need to sleep, it might cause you to try to fall asleep. Now, the more you try, the more alert your brain gets, which keeps you awake. But if you just pretend you're already sleeping, close your eyes, slow your breathing, lie still, eventually you would actually drift off. And this is how we normally fall asleep, by pretending we already are. Now, let's say you want to get fit. If you keep telling yourself, I need to get fit, it feels like a chore. You'll start and stop over and over. But if you just pretend you're already a fit person, well, you'll start making the choices a fit person makes. You'll pick the water over the soda. You'll go for the walk instead of scrolling. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because that's just what a fit person does. And if you pretend long enough, well, it might just stop being pretend. The crow picks up a cigarette butt, then drops it into a small slot on a vending machine. Cameras and sensors inside scan the object, checking if it's actually a cigarette. And if it recognizes the right shape, it releases a small piece of food as a reward. You see, the creators hoped that once a few crows caught on, other birds might copy them, until entire flocks could help clean the streets. And some crows did actually learn the system, but it never really caught on. Sprinkle a little pepper on the water, then dip your finger in dish soap and touch it right in the center. Now, because water has surface tension, where the particles on top stick to each other, pulling the surface tight, the moment soap touches that surface, that tension drops in that spot and breaks the particles apart. So the rest of the surface pulls back, dragging the pepper along with it. This is you, and these are your two parents. They each have two parents as well, who are your four grandparents, who each have two more parents. With every generation, the tree grows, meaning by the time you go back to the year 1400, you'll have over 16 million ancestors. And if you go back a few centuries more, your family tree will include more humans than the population of Earth at that time. But that's because the further back you go, the less people there were on Earth. So the more likely it is your ancestors were already related, with distant cousins marrying each other. And that means one ancestor will show up more than once in different places on your family tree, meaning it's not that big after all.